So welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Thursday, February 4th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul Demain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. An opposition faction within Montana's Little Shell tribe of Chippewa have scheduled a March 6th election in defiance of the tribe's president and some council members who say the move is illegitimate. The 4,300 members of the Loose-Knit tribe have roiled during the last 6 months by denial of its petition for federal recognition and the suspension of government grants and stimulus money. Members of the Little Shell Alliance, a group upset with the direction of tribal government, circumvented the tribal council and President John Sinclair to set up the March election. The alliance says more than 400 tribal members supported the election in a recent referendum. Sinclair says he's trying to set up a 3-judge tribunal to put alliance members on trial, but he says that could take months and won't be done by the March 6 elections. Secretary of the Interior Ken Salazar has met with leaders of 2 Massachusetts tribes opposed to the wind farm proposal for the waters off of Cape Cod. Salazar said January 2nd that he had a wonderful meeting with representatives of the Mashpee Wampanoags and the Wampanoag tribe of Aquinnah. Both tribes say the energy project would interfere with their ancient and sacred rituals and desecrate tribal burial sites. Salazar says he came to Massachusetts to keep a promise to consult with the tribes as the project moves forward. Salazar also has taken a boat tour of the Nantucket Sound on February 2nd. Developers have proposed erecting 130 turbines, each over 400 feet tall, over a 25-square swath of federal waters. Supporters say the project will provide cheap energy and reduce pollution. The Dighton Indian Council is honored to welcome Eda Zavalas Lopez, a healer speaker from the Peruvian Amazon, and you are also invited to attend her talk, Healing Voices of the Jungle, on Saturday, February 6th from 2 to 5 p.m. at 1111 Somerset Avenue in Dighton, Massachusetts. Eda Zavala is descended from the lineage of healers and is dedicated to the continuation of this tradition as well as the preservation of the Amazon rainforest. Besides maintaining her practice of ancestral medicine, she is co-founder of the Healing Center Hamike. She has worked with many indigenous communities to preserve the pristine forest and help protect their sacred lands. With her community in Peru, she is currently collaborating with the Rainforest Action Network to develop a project to preserve the Cordillera Azul National Park and Sacred Mountains, preserving the plant medicines, native species, and ancient knowledge. And today, as part of our continuing reports from around the country, we catch up with Lori Townsend, the news director from the Alaskan Public Radio Network, for a report on news from up in that corner of the continent. Lori Townsend, give us an idea of what's happening in Alaska this week at Alaskan Public Radio Network.
Hi, Paul. Well, I was hoping to catch up with a reporter who works for Alaska Dispatch and is in Point Hope right now covering the caribou hunter trial. I haven't heard from her yet, but she's expecting that the trial may wrap up today. And this happened, as you may recall, this happened in 2008. There was a dispute between the state and Point Hope hunters over carcasses that were left on the tundra. The state said that it was wanton waste, which is illegal. The hunters said that many of the animals were diseased or had been shot previously and had infected wounds, and they didn't want to take the meat back to the village. Yesterday's testimony, according to Jill and Alaska Dispatch, focused on expert testimony, kind of dueling experts as to whether or not you could contract brucellosis from diseased meat. And some experts say that there's no documented cases, at least in the state of Alaska, of people contracting it. But a state biologist did say that people could have had the illness and not known it. It's presents as flu-like symptoms. And the defense had an expert come up that said he did contract brucellosis in a lab in the 1950s. He was one of 3 medical students who contracted it. One person did die, and so his take on it was just because the risk isn't large doesn't mean it's insignificant, and that the precautions that are taken in laboratory settings to avoid exposure to diseases aren't possible for hunters out in the field. So these are some of the issues that are being weighed in this case. Of the original 8 defendants, there's only 3 that have gone to trial now. The others took plea deals. And the state has lowered the charges from misdemeanor crimes to a civil violation. So there's no trial. It's just a judge in Point Hope who's deciding this. And there is more information at alaskadispatch.com, which is the online news service based here in the state that's covering the trial. They have a reporter up there right now.
Okay. That was a couple questions. Number one, there was originally 8 people charged. 5 of them have taken plea agreements, which meant that they agreed to plead guilty to some kind of a charge. Was it the misdemeanor charge or was it the civil charge? Do you know which charge?
It was just recently that the state lowered to the civil charge, so that's what rendered it, made it possible for this proceeding to take place without a jury. The state was pushing before, when they wanted a jury trial, to move it out of Point Hope, saying that they didn't think they could get an impartial jury there, but now that there is no jury trial, it's just a judge handling the case. So those men that took a plea agreement pleaded to their charges under the original set of charges, which were misdemeanors.
Okay. And it seems to me that sometimes if there's a different set of circumstances later on, that their crimes could be yet modified depending on the outcome of this. And the whole issue of brucellosis seems to me to be something, unless you're going to have a field person out there, people are making judgments about the disease nature of a carcass versus harvesting it to the community, and it seems to me that some of those decisions have to be made in the field without, you don't have experts standing around during a hunt like that.
That's been a lot of the debate over this case. Is the state says that they have criteria that determines whether or not meat should be salvaged, and people in Point Hope are saying, well, we have our methods also that date back much longer than the state's methods, and we know what we're doing out in the field. So this is some of the debate against kind of traditional methods and state law.
Looks like it might be schedulable then.
Okay, do you got what else is happening up in Alaska?
Yeah, you may recall that we talked about the fact that Secretary Locke, Commerce Secretary Locke, had declared the Yukon fisheries disaster because of low returns, and now the state has imposed a restriction on the gillnet mesh size that fishermen will be able to use starting in 2011. They won't be able to use the 8 or 8.5 inch size mesh. It will have to be 7 inches. Some fishermen are upset by that.
They're trying to restrict the size of what they're bringing in there, so they're going to try to reduce the size of the fishery that's coming in those gill nets.
Well, what they want to do is allow more escapement of the larger kings, the Chinook salmon. They want the bigger ones to get through, and so they're going to restrict the net size because of they're trying to figure out why there's such low returns, and they want to ensure that some of those larger kings get through. A lot of the fishermen are upset about that. Some of them do support the idea of reduced net size, but it's placing further restrictions on an already really economically depressed area. They have the highest unemployment in those Yukon River villages, and the lowest per capita household income in the state. And so these folks are already suffering a lot from the economic conditions there, and now they'll have further restrictions on their fishery, their subsistence and commercial fishery.
Okay. This story about the trial and other news coming out of Alaskan Public Radio, where can people find that? Again, what's your website URL?
It is www.aprn.org.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you all for stopping in with us today. Stop in again soon. Be good.